Let's Talk Native is produced at the LTN Studios on the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. We break all the rules for Native media by peeling back the layers of assimilation and indoctrination. No prayers, no buffalo speeches, and no spirituality shows. While this podcast does not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do take a tough look at history, oppression, and our survival. But the real goal here is to bring our people together by breaking down what separates us. So, welcome to Let's Talk Native with John Kane.
So everyone, welcome to Let's Talk Native. I've got to talk about an issue that I have talked about before, but let me explain why. A recent ruling came in an appeals court, a ruling against the Seneca Nation, which for all intents and purposes, compels the Seneca Nation to pay the money that they've been withholding to the state on this battle over revenue sharing with the state of New York. It looks like it's about $420 or $430 million. So it's not $500 million as I've said in the past, but it's over $400 million. And of course, this happens while the confirmation hearings are wrapping up for Deb Haaland as Secretary of the Interior. I don't want to spend a great deal of time talking about the intricacies of the Gaming Compact or of the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act or the Haaland hearings. But I do want to explain the three core issues that the Interior Department has failed to address. Some of these are failures that where they failed to address it for 30 years. But I want to talk about the three real critical issues for the Seneca Nation and their interaction with the Interior Department. But let me first start by saying the reason I think it is so critical for the Interior Department to address these issues is because the Seneca Nation has run out of time here. They've tried some court appearances. They've used the federal courts to kick the can as far as they can. And now with this last ruling from the appeals court, they've exhausted all of those legal challenges. And I have to say, these legal challenges were destined to fail because most of what is being argued is whether the Seneca Nation can overturn, for all intents and purposes, the arbitration ruling that came against them. And these courts are basically just going to say, look, you agreed to arbitration, and in that agreement, in your compact with arbitration, you agreed that you would not pursue any other remedies outside of arbitration. So you can't appeal your arbitration ruling in federal court. So this was destined to happen. For all of these issues with the gaming compact, with revenue sharing, and where the state and the state and the Seneca Nation lie on this issue, it really does all come back to the Interior Department. And IGRA's been in place for over 30 years, and the Interior Department has really been derelict in their oversight of state abuses as it relates to this thing. So again, I want to talk about the three issues that the Seneca Nation really needs has needed the Interior Department to address. And I'll start with essentially the last real issue, which is the arbitration ruling. Now, one of the arbitration judges, Kevin Washburn, when he was overruled by the two non-native judges, he basically said these two guys rewrote the compact. They added language. They interpreted the compact in such a way that they were going to add provisions to the compact. And in doing so, what they're saying is, we're saying you've got to pay revenue sharing for another 7 years, even though it's not written into the compact. So they added language. And so the argument needs to be made is, if an arbitration panel, if a ruling came from an arbitration panel that changes or adds language to the compact, shouldn't the Interior Department have to sign off on it? Because they have to sign off on any amendments to a gaming compact, any new gaming compact. The Seneca Nation tried to press the previous administration to do that, but they balked at it. And they said, well, unless both sides want us to do that, unless the state and the Seneca Nation wants us to look at it, we're not going to look at it. So this is something that could be pressed now, and it should be pressed now. Regardless of whatever the Interior Department would rule on this thing, it should be required that if a change in a compact happens, and in this situation, a unilateral change, because the Seneca Nation doesn't agree with this change, then the Interior Department should have to rule. So that's one issue. The other issue is, and this is another dereliction of the Interior Department for many, many years, is the revenue sharing provisions in the first place. Are they legal? Are they legal if what the state has conceded for this revenue sharing isn't substantial enough, and it can't be quantified to be substantial enough to justify the amount of payment? The Seneca Nation paid the state of New York $1.4 billion in 14 years of the initial term of their compact. And by no estimation can you come up with, or calculation, can you come up with a value anywhere near that as far as the state's exclusivity provision is concerned. So if they aren't getting something of value for what they're paying the state, is it legal? And of course, in this situation where the Seneca Nation is now forced to pay it, that it is not something that they agreed upon, is it legal? So again, is revenue sharing as it exists, specifically here in New York, between the New York State and the Seneca Nation, is it legal? And that's a perfectly fair question to ask, and it's a question that needs to be asked and answered with the understanding that in order for it to be legal, then the state has to make its case that the industry, looking at the exclusivity that they provided, suggests that it's worth $1.4 billion in the first 14 years, and perhaps certainly another $800 million to $1 billion going forward. And of course, the state has competed against the Seneca Nation with their gaming parlors that they placed in the racetracks, and they have now entered into Class 3 gaming, into the Class 3 gaming market with their full-blown casinos, state licensed casinos, one of which is essentially in the same market, even though it's physically placed just outside the exclusivity zone. They advertise in Western New York. They advertise within the Seneca Nation's gaming market. So there's no question that the Seneca Nation is not enjoying some sort of non-compete status for these billions of dollars that they're paying the state. And the third issue is whether a state can simply walk away from a gaming compact or fail to renew a compact and effectively shut a native casino down. Because that's the loaded threat. That's where revenue sharing has become extortion. Because if the native gaming enterprise, Seneca Nation in this case, believe that they have to enter into a revenue sharing agreement, or the state's going to walk away from the compact and thereby shut them down, then that's a loaded gun to your head. That is not sharing revenue based on the state giving you something, because the gift isn't the gaming compact. That's clear within the definitions of IGRA. And having said that, if you want more information on IGRA, I have done a YouTube video, and you can go to my Let's Talk Native TV YouTube channel and look for John Kane Discusses IGRA. This is a really comprehensive but real good thumbnail sketch of what IGRA is and what it isn't. And this video has actually been used in at least one university that I know that teaches about native gaming. So take a look at that video. It'll teach you what I'm not going to belabor here in this program. But I think it's important that people understand that the purpose of IGRA was to protect native peoples from organized crime and overly aggressive states, which in this case seem to be the same thing. So in the absence of the Interior Department, which is the agency charged with enforcing IGRA against the states, and against native gaming, the states have had their way with the states have basically gotten away with extorting billions of dollars from native gaming in the form of revenue sharing, even though on its face that is prohibited by the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. So the question right now is, why would this? Because it does appear that the Seneca Nation is planning to pay the state. They're planning to cut a check for $420 or $430 million to the state of New York. So the question is why? Well, part of the reason is, yes, they've exhausted their legal challenges in federal court with this latest appeals ruling, and the other issue is that if they don't pay, they are forced to pay a penalty, an interest penalty, or some sort of punitive damages for not paying. And so they won't be just stuck paying $430 million. They'll be stuck paying something. Somebody told me that it was several million dollars a day that was going to be accrued. I don't know if that's true or not. But so that's the argument for the Seneca Nation paying. The argument for not paying is that these unanswered questions have been hanging out there since the Clinton administration. So Clinton, Bush, 8 years of Clinton, 8 years of Bush, 8 years of Obama, and 4 years of Trump. And there is now a new administration. And the thing about these questions is it's not that anybody's gotten the bad answer back. They've either gotten no answer, or they're relying on something that was written at the earliest, in the early phases of IGRA. There's no contemporary ruling or contemporary statement relating to revenue sharing, related to changes in the compact, or related to whether a state can essentially shut a native gaming facility down by just failing to renew a compact. Those questions need to be answered. Regardless of what the answer is, those questions need to be asked and answered of this administration, of this Interior Department, and frankly, of this Interior Secretary. Now, she may or may not be confirmed even as we speak. I don't know, but she's on the cusp of being confirmed. It does appear that she has survived the confirmation hearings and is likely to be confirmed. And this is a native person. This is Deborah Haaland, who is Laguna Pueblo from New Mexico. She has gaming experience, because that's what she did. She served in some capacity with the economic development and the gaming industry of the Laguna Pueblo. And she has some experience because New Mexico is one of those states that has been overtly aggressive in terms of revenue sharing with native gaming. So she is not, ill-equipped to have an opinion on this. And in this situation, this is just, she only has to do what the previous, or what has been written about the responsibility of the Interior Department and the prohibitions against. She's just got to enforce the regulations against the state. I mean, there's no way that if she makes a legitimate ruling that it can harm the Seneca Nation. And honestly, she should be given a shot. She should be given a shot to fix this. She should be given a shot to fix what the white men who have been in that position before her have failed to do. But I'll tell you, it isn't just that she should be given a shot. She should be compelled to give an answer. And if the Seneca Nation or any of the other nations facing the same thing get a direct response out of the Interior Department that says, no, we're not going to do it, then let's put it out there. Because all of the euphoria over having a native Interior Secretary should be confronted with the reality of what she may or may not do. If she steps up and she does what she's supposed to do, what previous secretaries were supposed to do, then she will have earned something in the eyes of quote unquote Indian country. She will have earned some credibility in that position, and then we can say, look, I guess there is a benefit to having a native person in that position. But if she doesn't, and if she doesn't address the questions, if she fails to answer the questions, look, she's got other responsibilities in terms of the Bureau of Land Management and and any number of things involved with mining and the extractive industries and pipelines and all that other stuff. And there is a lot of room within her rulings on these things to either bypass some of the regulations that are already written. She doesn't need any new laws. She doesn't need a piece of legislation as it relates to either pipelines or the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. It's there. All she has to do is do her job. And if she doesn't, then myself, the Seneca Nation, anybody else who's watching this issue can say, well, there you have it. Now we've got a Native person doing the oppressing, not just the white guys who preceded her. So, or we get to say, look, getting a Native person in there who does have some insight, who does know this issue, who is prepared to take on the challenges, then look, we have been served by that. And, and I'll shut my mouth on that one. I mean, of course, there will be other issues that we'll have to see where she comes out on. But here's one of the challenges, because like so many issues in American politics, in fact, in American life, things are split up along the political divisions. It's right versus left. It's Democrat versus Republican. Well, in this situation, Deborah Haaland, a Democrat, sitting as the Interior Secretary, will, if she does her job, will essentially have to take on a prominent Democratic governor in Andrew Cuomo. Regardless of whatever controversy he's going through between sexual harassment allegations and his handling of COVID as it relates to nursing homes, he is still a prominent Democratic figure in the party in the United States, not just in New York State, in the United States. There are some who still talk about him as a possible presidential candidate one day. So will she take on this issue knowing that one of her main antagonists may be a fellow Democrat? That ends up being a question. But I guess the reason I wanted to do this story today, even though I've addressed this issue many times before, is I think the Seneca people. So for those Senecas who do listen to the podcast, and for those of you who know Senecas, the question has to be, why is the Seneca Nation not trying to kick the can into the lap of Deborah Haaland? I mean, if there's, what I'm hearing is that the Seneca Nation is going to cut a check. The Seneca Nation is going to cut the check to New York State, and they're making the arrangements to do that now. I don't know if it's true, but that's just the buzz that I've picked up. And of course, you've got mayors in Niagara Falls and in Buffalo and Salamanca that are just chomping at the bit, hoping that they're going to get their $40 million out of this, out of the $100 million that will come back to Western New York. They're all starry-eyed about this money coming in, especially with what COVID has done to their local economies. They were in trouble before COVID. Yeah, and the casinos, the Seneca Nation casinos in particular, had nothing to do with the problems that they've had. They've been part of the solution because they have been making payments to the state, and those payments have 25% of those numbers have come back. But keep in mind, in the 14 years of the first term of the gaming compact between the Seneca Nation and New York State, the Seneca Nation paid $1.4 billion. Only $400 million of that came back. So, again, do the math. So for all these mayors, craving these dollars that come to them, they're still ignoring the fact that $1 billion left Western New York. $1 billion left the Western New York economy, and it went to Albany, and it didn't come back. Out of the 1.4 came back billion, but $1 billion didn't. That's money that left the economy. That's money that left. That didn't get spent in the stores, that didn't get spent on professional services, that didn't get, spent in restaurants and in auto dealers and all of that stuff. That's money gone. So when I hear a mayor saying, oh, we're so glad the Seneca Nation is paying, but then you better understand that even though the Seneca Nation is paying the state of New York, it's the state of New York taking hundreds of millions of dollars, or in this case, billions of dollars out of Western New York. So you can get, your tens of millions of dollars in payback from Albany. Shame on you for wishing this on the Seneca Nation and wishing it on your own community, because you're basically greasing the skids for money to be sucked out of Western New York. And I feel strongly about that, because nobody has done any analysis on this. Everybody keeps saying, oh, but our communities are struggling. Well, you know who else is struggling? The Seneca Nation. Gaming is almost singularly their means of public finance. It is how the Seneca Nation is funded. It is how they pay for their buildings. It's how they pay for their construction. It's how they pay for their programs. It's how they redistribute some of that money back to the individual Senecas. All of that stuff is at risk. Their health clinic, their education department, all of that is at risk. $400 million means a hell of a lot more to the Seneca Nation than it does to New York State. And while the mayors of Niagara Falls, Buffalo, and Salamanca are crying about not having enough revenue for their cities, nobody's been hearing the Seneca Nation cry about it. But I'm telling you right now, the Seneca Nation is struggling to maintain its level of service to their people because of this pandemic. That $400 million that the state is trying to grab from them right now, trying to squeeze out of them for an exclusivity that doesn't exist, that $400 million will go a long way to helping the Seneca Nation get through this pandemic. And they can have no anticipation about getting help from the state or from the federal government. Some might come. But this is their means to take care of themselves with their own resources, with their own revenue, with their own means of public finance, while the state's trying to squeeze money out of them. So, look, I hope that enough Senecas can encourage the Seneca Nation to at least force an answer out of the Interior Department. And I don't know if they're getting bad advice from the legal counsel. I suspect that's part of it. I don't know if the Seneca Nation is caught into some of this bipartisan, bickering and believes that Deb Haaland is going to be a failure for them. Maybe that's their belief. But how do you know if you don't look? I'm as critical as anybody of Native people entering into that system, but she's there. And she's probably in the midst of being confirmed now, or will be confirmed shortly. Give her a shot. Give her a shot. And like I said, more than give her a shot. Call her out. Call Biden out. Call this administration out to do what the previous administrations haven't done. Worst case scenario, you're going to pay the money, and you might incur some penalties. But the risk, the reward for this risk, is that you don't pay the $400 million at all. And you don't pay another $400 million over the next 3 years. And that you aren't compelled by the state of New York to share your revenue, going forward forever, at the risk that they're gonna cancel your compact and shut your doors. Get the answers to the questions that the Interior Department for the last 30 years has failed to answer. Look, IGRA is a flawed document. It is a flawed law. And it put New York State and every state in bed with Native people when the states didn't have the authority to be there in the first place. But this is a way that the promise of IGRA was that it was going to hold back states from being overly aggressive. This is a way to make that, at least part of that, come true. And if not, then we need to stop suggesting that the game is rigged and show that the game is rigged. Show that the Interior Department is rigged, that IGRA is rigged, that the state is rigged. Let's put it out there and be clear about it, so we can get away with these illusions that we're somehow buying goodwill from the state of New York, or we're buying goodwill from the federal government. Let's stop playing that game. Let's be honest about what it is by making them be honest. Regardless of what they rule, those three questions: can an arbitration panel, change a compact without the Interior Department ruling on it? Can that happen? That question: is revenue sharing as it exists today legal under IGRA? Just ask the question. And 3, can a state shut down a casino, a native casino, by simply walking away from a gaming compact? How do we not know the answers? The Seneca Nation has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on lawyers in the almost 20 years that they've been in gaming. How do they not know the answer to these questions? How does nobody know the answer to these questions after 30 years of the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act? And I'll tell you why. Because most of these compacts, most of these gaming deals have been manipulated by lawyers who don't serve us. They serve the federal government. They generally try to serve a broader native audience, and they pitch themselves as experts in Indian gaming. And because that's what they do, they are not going to go too far out of their way. But this is an answer. These are answers to questions that need to be asked, and they need to be answered. So the Seneca Nation knows what it's got to do going forward, and not just the Seneca Nation. Look, there are nations all around, Turtle Island, who are looking at the Seneca Nation and others to see how this thing's going to work out. Certainly, the Mohawks and the Oneidas, now the Senecas. Is everybody going to continue to be fleeced by the state of New York, forced to pay 25% of their slot revenue, the net slot drop, which is really closer to 50% of the slot revenue? Is everybody going to be forced to do this, even as the state props up their own state licensed casinos and cut them slack on their percentages? There is no exclusivity. There's no protected market for the Seneca Nation or the Oneidas or the Mohawks, and there won't be for the Senecas. So what are they going to pay the state for? What concession is the state going to offer that will allow the Interior Department to approve these revenue sharing agreements? There's nothing that they can offer. I mean, the market's already too saturated. There's too much gaming that exists, not only by the states, but by all the states around. There's lottery, there's casinos, there's bingo halls, there's any number of things that really pit the Seneca Nation and any native gaming operation in direct competition, sports betting, in direct competition with others. It's a shrinking market, and it's a populated market. So what could the states possibly offer that would be worth $1 billion over 7 or 8 years? Almost nothing. So, look, I hope the Seneca Nation drags its feet just long enough so that they can at least force an answer out of this administration, out of this Interior Department, out of this Interior Secretary. And shame on Deb Haaland if she doesn't provide an answer. Shame on her if she provides the wrong answer. And, shame on all of you who sat there, with doe eyes about how wonderful it was to get a native person in the Interior Department. This is the challenge of today. Look, we've got pipeline issues, we've got environmental issues, we've got a lot of other issues, but this is one of the easy ones. This is essentially low-hanging fruit for this Interior Department to do right by native people who have become increasingly dependent on casino gaming. This was a path we were lured down. And right now we've got so many native territories that depend on their casino revenue as their means of public finance. And one thing that COVID has proven is that nothing is infallible. We knew that gaming wasn't recession-proof, but we damn sure know that it's not pandemic-proof. And unless the Interior Department finally steps up, it's not, it also can't withstand the aggression of states that has been allowed to fester for 30 years in some cases, certainly 20 years, almost 20 years in the case of the Seneca Nation. I'm hoping the Seneca Nation stands tough at least long enough to get an answer. And I hope they stand tough enough to demand an answer. I think it's in everybody's best interest, even if there's some risk. So I wanted to address that today. Again, I encourage you to look at our YouTube channel. John Kane Discusses IGRA. It'll give you some insight on what the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act is. And we'll bring something back to you next time. Thanks for listening. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Yahweh.